Hi everyone, Deb Noller here, and today we are joined with a new Switch person who is Casey Talon. She is our Director of Smart Building Impact, and welcome to you, Casey.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
So before we get into the smart building industry and where we think that's going, I'd really love you just to maybe share with everybody, what was your background, maybe what you studied, where you grew up, how you ended up in this industry.
Sure. So I grew up in Minnesota and I am a proud Badger. So I graduated from the University of Wisconsin for undergrad and I studied economics. Then I made my way to Colorado after long dreams of living in the Mountain West. After a few years of exploring fun, non-professionally focused jobs, I made my way back to graduate school and I studied environmental science and policy at the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia. And from there, it was kind of the time when everyone was expecting the carbon markets to really take off. And so I, like most of my classmates in that year, joined a carbon consultancy. We were a project developer. And that was really my first dive into career and focus on sustainability and carbon. And forever, my goal was to sort of originally make an impact in the environment, which morphed into climate change. And then made my way into the role of an industry analyst and consultant and just realized the enormous opportunity to tackle decarbonization of the built environment. And I was immediately just enthralled with the industry and the challenge at hand, but also how exciting it was to just sort of marry really business relevant technology and have huge sustainability impacts. And so it's been a passion and an area I've been really excited to build a career around.
Yeah, I think I can probably date stamp that time of the carbon trading markets around 2008, 2010, sometime in that sort of period or in that window when we all thought the carbon trading was really going to be the big thing that kind of moved the needle on reducing carbon emissions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what about your background, childhood, made you a complete nut around the environment like me? Like, what was the thing that made you like really care about this stuff?
I loved science. And I was fascinated. I think I just had really good teachers really young. I mean, I remember probably the first thing that I found some success in was like a science fair project around how do you get oil off feathers, because it was the Exxon Valdez and I was young and impressionable. And then having like a club to raise money for buying acres of rainforest when that was a thing, And so it was just always something I was really passionate about and wanted to figure out a way I could do something about it with, whatever skills I could build.
Yeah. When in one of our other Beers with Engineers talks, we talked about how important parents are to, how they instill can-do attitude in especially young girls and the types of careers that they have. But the other such, amazing influences on all of us is teachers. And I don't think anywhere near enough gratitude and applause is given to how important teachers are in guiding us in our life to what we end up going on and doing.
I have incredibly vivid memories of those science classes in like 7th grade and high school, and not even being like the best in the class, but just the passion that they brought, and they instilled the idea that you could do something and make a difference when you're that impressionable. It's so important.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same as me, actually. I grew up doing all of the sciences, but I didn't go into economics. How come you went into economics?
So I, in undergrad, was fascinated by all kinds of things. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I think I took the 101 in every discipline, and I found my way to economics junior year and tortured myself by doing something like 90% of my credits senior year. So I had all economics all the time my senior year. And I just found it fascinating because it was a way to look at what's happening in the world with quantity and tell a big story, macroeconomics in particular. I just think it's a fascinating study of trying to create a story of what is just happening and make sense of the world.
Cool. Well, I did the reverse. I did environmental science first, found it very difficult to find employment, went back to university and did commerce with computer science. So I did almost exactly what you did, but in reverse. So you did economics, you did a little bit of kicking around, you went back to university, you studied environmental science and policy. How did you get into research?
Um, so after the carbon market thing, a couple of years in, I was really focused on doing the carbon footprinting and realized that was going to be a commodity skill, and I didn't want to just spend my life in kind of somewhat simplistic spreadsheets that would automate. I was really excited about engaging clients and just getting in a more strategic role, and also recognizing that sort of moving from quantifying into implementation. And I was fascinated by that. I've always loved research. At one point, I thought about getting my PhD in resource economics. And so I am probably one of the only people in the world who can say I got a job from monster.com. And I read a job description for an industry analyst in renewable and distributed energy. And I don't think I even had a clue what it meant, but it was research and it was writing, and I love writing and sort of storytelling. And so I took a leap, and it was a fantastic way to sort of really kickstart my career and just learn as much as I could about energy and the industry.
Yeah, it's one of the skills that I greatly admire because we're surrounded by, computer scientists and engineers. So when you actually have people who can write, which is actually another thing that I got from both my parents and my teachers, is just a genuine love of the English language. And so whenever people can write, I'm completely in admiration and in love with those people. And we do have a couple of people in our team who are really great writers. So it's fantastic.
I too have a very strong passion for my family. My dad was an English major, and my parents are those people who have like piles of books in every corner around the house. So I understand that being burnt into your brain at a very young age.
Yeah, and instill a love of reading. I mean, a love of reading is just the most powerful gift that any parent can give their kids. Yeah. So why switch?
Well, I have loved watching Switch. I mean, I met you at an industry event, years ago, and kind of kept in touch. And I honestly always thought that the technology was really well developed. And then I was always really excited about hearing your point of view, and also the uniqueness of a woman leader in this industry is always something that, caught my attention. And everyone I've met at the team, I mean, I think you hear it in every one of these conversations, but it truly is a unique team. To your point, you have brilliant writers, you have exceptional engineers, you have people who are really passionate in development. I mean, it's just an incredible team. And so that, just as the company, was really interesting, but also timing. I mean, maybe 2020 made everyone step back and think about what is their role in the world. What are you going to do? If there's any time to take a leap, maybe this is the year. And I just wanted to get closer to having a direct impact, spending time consulting with customers that may be either providing a service or technology or looking at it is one thing, but trying to help solve these challenges directly was really exciting. And I just wanted to see what I could do to try to help accelerate the market.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, 2020 is definitely, well, let's hope it's an outlier. I suspect it's not, to be honest. I suspect 2020 is just the beginning of a decade of chaos. But let's say it was an outlier. It could easily have been the end of a lot of companies, including Switch. I mean, you couldn't really have predicted how this year would pan out. It could have gone either way. And so, it's a huge leap of faith for you to take from a very safe, risk averse, great career path company that you were in to join a company like Switch that is in a very uncertain, unknown, uncharted, unproven trajectory.
Yeah, I definitely thought about that. But I think the reward is that upside. And I do think that this year, in many respects, is sort of this canary in the coal mine. Like, maybe the only thing we know going forward is that disruption and uncertainty are what is the norm. And so, everything I was seeing was that it was simply accelerating trends we've all been talking about. And so, Switch is so well positioned to just capitalize on that, I think.
So let's talk about that. Why do you think why now? Why I mean you've written about smart buildings and the energy markets. You've seen this you've seen the advent of clean tech, you've seen the advent of the whole carbon trading, and you've seen and those things come and be in flavor and go again. Why is smart buildings not going to be just the next, and then IoT? Why is this not going to be just the next thing that comes, has its little, day in the sun, and then just disappears again?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a culmination of things that, you know, for years we've been talking about digital transformation and that executives were looking for data-driven decision making. I mean, you hear that all the time. And then, I had sort of had a lot of conversations around this sort of top-down and bottom-up pressure that people want the experience in buildings to be very much like what they're experiencing at home, or how we've all become so reliant on technology. We have a generation of digital natives. And so I think that was a pressure we were seeing mounting. And then you accelerate that with the fact that now people realize that technology is going to be the way they can prove that they're complying with safety requirements, that they're making safe space. And that may seem like it's a temporary thing. Like, is indoor air quality a temporary thing? I don't think so, because unfortunately, I do think we're just embarking on an era of disruption after disruption from a health perspective. But also, I think that people just expect that if people are sitting around their kitchen tables and having conversations around whether or not there's a data point proving public health, that's a game changer. And I don't think it's going anywhere. And I think also the same technology stack delivers the insight to know that you're making a building healthy and safe, also brings all these really impressive bottom line benefits that executives care about all the time. And a healthy space is a productive space. Like, that's a big deal, and that's always going to be important.
So do you think COVID accelerated that?
Yeah, I do. I think you see the companies that have been able to weather this storm, and some that have even been able to build more business, is because they are digital. They believe in these technologies, and they're utilizing them to reach their customers and deliver their services or even enhance them.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that if we're going to entice people back to the office, we're going to have to provide a different space for people to work in. People know that they can, if they've just got to get their head down and get work done, they can get that done anywhere. They've just proven to themselves, their families, their bosses, that they can do that anywhere, and they've done that for most of this year. But if we're really going to get people back into the office, we're going to have to provide a different environment and a different reason for coming into the office. But I also believe that with that is going to be some KPIs around how is space used, and if we're going to get people into the space, making sure that people feel really comfortable around the risk of that space. A bit like the post 9/11 airport experience. It changed irreversibly. Never came back to what it was prior to 9/11. It was a single event that changed the way we travel for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and I think it's even in any kind of vertical, you can see this impact, whether it's healthcare or manufacturing or the supply chain. I mean, just how dramatically our shopping habits have changed. I mean, it's sort of, I feel like, universal in every way we use the built environment. These technologies will have incredible impacts, I think.
Yeah. So why do you think real estate has been so slow to adopt digital technologies? I mean, they've been around for 20 years. The technologies have been there. Why do you think there's been this aversion to uptake?
I mean, I think a huge part of it is it's a fundamental question of how do you change a business model, and how do you change a mindset that the revenue stream's there. Why should they be forced to change? And that the owners were at the helm, and business as usual worked. I think that's a big thing. And I also think, I think a lot of it's just the people, the whole process and the way in which we have operated buildings. I mean, just the idea of where these skills live, this complete disconnect for so many organizations. And how do you run a chiller, and how do you design the IT architecture within an organization, are forever never on the same page. And so that's one thing, even on the customer side. But then on the services side, the separation between these skill sets, I think, has been a huge challenge.
Yeah, so I think we're in agreement there. The incentives just weren't big enough to for people to be bothered or to go through that pain of that. And I think what COVID has shown is this is why you needed to adopt technologies over the last 5 years, is so you could monitor your buildings remotely, see what was going on without having to send a team out there, control things and hibernate buildings, and also give your tenants the data to reassure them to come back. So apart from those kind of aligning incentives, what do you think are the other big tailwinds behind our market that are really, picking this industry up and moving along faster than it might have done ordinarily?
I mean, I think that the energy industry transformation is a big deal. I don't think that the sort of value proposition that these smart building solutions were an energy efficiency tool was enough. It's a part of the story, but a 10% reduction in your operating costs wasn't going to move the market from a customer perspective. But the overall transformation of the energy industry is huge. The fact that people want to have distributed energy, they want to have solar, they want to make sure that they're getting green and efficient energy as a part of this much bigger conversation around sustainability and climate, I think is huge. And that's happening. I mean, in the U.S., there was obviously all kinds of politicized debate, but regardless, it was happening. This is coming, and so having technology that can ensure you're utilizing all of that investment and optimizing buildings to actually take advantage or move toward electrification and all of these pathways, I think is coming and coming more quickly. You have the incentives at the state level, at city level in the U.S., and then obviously it's a totally different avenue in other regions.
So those changes, do you think they're driven by the whole climate change conversation, or do you think they're being driven by the fact that the demand for energy is exceeding our ability to supply?
I mean, I think the reality of the climate emergency is real. I mean, you see open letters coming from CEOs that may represent traditional steel industry. I mean, the fact that this is no longer an idealized goal of environmentalists or left wingers. This is reality. They know that it's not only a risk to their business and their bottom line. Their investors are demanding it. They're going to be required to demonstrate climate. They're going to disclose their risk. They know this impacts their future to operate as a successful enterprise. And they know that they have to be committed to get employees, to keep customers. I think there's just this sort of all these cogs that are moving in the same direction all of a sudden.
Yeah. And I think there's no better example of that than Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and China, both making very recent and very aggressive commitments to being carbon neutral by 2050. I mean, like the UK has said they're not going to sell um, fossil fuel powered motor vehicles after 2030. They are literally going to transition their entire new car industry from where it is today to electric by 2030, which is, we're talking about 9 years.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, even in the US, I think the fact that, which is such a car centric, kind of wide open spaces culture, and maybe especially noticeable in the West, but you see, major mainstream US car companies coming out and talking about, I don't know, electric muscle cars and trucks. That's significant in a time where they're not being forced to.
Yeah. And so we've got digitization, we've got the climate crisis, we've got CEOs around the world who know that even if they don't believe in the climate crisis, their customers do. So they have to at least be perceived to be having that conversation. Otherwise, their consumers are going to leave the company. And so, like it or not, they're being driven to the whole ESG and carbon emissions, or the reduction in carbon emissions. And then I think one of the huge tailwinds behind companies like Switch and our entire industry actually is this whole post-COVID stimulus, which is that money is looking for how to create new jobs, and not just new jobs that just give people money in their pocket, but it's actually looking for that competitive advantage and creating digital jobs and smart jobs. So do you also agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that upside is undeniable. And I mean, these solutions, the economics are just there. And so even if you don't want to defend the benefit from a climate perspective, I mean, the economics, you can't argue with them. And I mean, right now with the decimation of the world economy and how many people are desperately looking for jobs, and in industries they probably can't go back to. And if they want to go back to, not for a very long time, I think there's a permanent potentially impact of what we've just gone through. And so being able to say this is a pathway to give better jobs in future, focused skills is really hopeful. Maybe a bit of a glimmer of optimism in a pretty dark time.
It is, and you look at our company, and we're constantly hiring. And one of the big challenges we have is we cannot hire somebody off the street who has all of the skills that we need for what we're doing. We have to take somebody who's got one of the skills and train them in the other 9. But that person then got 9 other skills and also is going to be in hot demand for all of these companies that are doing some sort of digital transformation of their real estate, because every building globally has to transform themselves from disconnected data systems people over the next 7 or 8 years into smart connected digital. And that's where we need just hundreds of thousands of people that can carry out that enormous lift. So I'm actually really excited about smart buildings, the impact that we can have as an industry, but not just the impact on the environment, but also the impact on the next generation and the smart professions and the smart jobs that we're creating. I mean, and your job title is a classic example of that. I mean, I don't know how many people out there exist with the title of Director of Smart Buildings Impact, but I would suggest there's probably 5 globally. And it's, if you think about everybody in Switch and the kind of careers that they could have post-Switch, that's actually just an example of an entire industry in its infancy. So I'm tremendously excited about that.
Yeah, and just to throw out a recent piece of research we did, I mean, I think it's really compelling. This is across the board. We did this survey of more than 200 decision makers, and over 70% said they have committed to digital transformation, and over 50% to a smart building strategy. Like, that's significant. That is now mainstream, but how do you get there? And to your point, that is an enormous opportunity for just building teams that have these unique new skills. It's not an easy lift, but I think it's really exciting and hopeful.
Yeah. So what would you say to people that are out there who might have lost their job during 2020, who are thinking about what can they do to resurrect their career? They've been working somewhere in one of the adjacent or similar industries. I mean, we are not an industry that's closed to new entrants. You can come into our industry from a range of different backgrounds, everything from electricians and technicians right through to data scientists. So what would you say to somebody who might be looking at this interview that's thinking, smart buildings, I hadn't thought about that. What would your advice be?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you talked about, this is a huge, hairy problem, right? That this is not something that one company is going to solve, and everyone who's recognizing there's an opportunity needs a whole bunch of different skill sets. And so if you were an electrician, if you were in engineering in some capacity, I mean, I think looking beyond the traditional maybe set of companies that you looked at in the past, looking at some startups, looking at technology providers. I mean, people are coming at this from all different angles, and I think the lines are blurring. So what we used to segment is, these were architecture companies, these were engineering companies, this was a consultant, this was an IT provider. All those lines are blurring, and I think everyone's realizing it's a hard problem, and we need a bunch of different skills, and we need to be able to figure out how to create partnerships and collaboration. And so thinking about your skill set, but looking at a broader menu of potential pathways into jobs is going to be important.
Cool. Well, Casey, I am tremendously grateful, and my word of the year has been gratitude, but really grateful that you joined the company, joined the team, took that leap of faith, which it's a brave move to leave a safe career and to embark on something with new companies in this space. I hope that you won't be sorry when you look back on your career in 10 or 15 years time. But I just wanted to extend from the senior leadership team of Switch to you a really heartfelt thank you for joining the team.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. It's been a very exciting start, that's for sure.